Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Our guest says it's time to move on from communication to positive influence. Let's find out how from our guest, Huijin Kong. Huijin, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks very much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this, Bill.
Now, you've written a terrific book with a co-author. The book is Positive Influence, the First and Last Mile of Leadership. And we've been on almost 35 years, and we really don't have that many times where people spoke of the subject influence. So this is extremely interesting to me today. And you start out the book by pointing out that we are either the influenced or the influencers in different situations. Can you talk about that? Because I never thought of that, and obviously it's a very true statement.
Absolutely. Influence is so ubiquitous in our lives, both work as well as personal. It's almost like water. So it's no wonder that many of us have become subconscious about influence, be it what's happening to us or what we are wielding. But we see influence as the essential soft skill of the 21st century. And with such potential for more positive outcomes, not only for us, ourselves, but also for the people around us, the companies, the organization, and society.
Reading your book, it really is amazing because now as I go through the day, the simplest things, if I go into a store and I see a sign, it's influencing me whether I want to buy a certain product. Maybe it's on sale. Maybe there's a special 2-for-1. If I go further down the street, someone is talking to me, and just the fact that they mention a hot dog or a donut, now they made me hungry. Now I want to go to Dunkin' Donuts or maybe McDonald's for lunch or something. So as I think of it, I honestly barely a minute goes by that something is influencing me, and maybe even in a negative way. I look and see that I'm out of coffee, so I have to make a note to buy coffee when I go out or get more toothpaste or something. I see in your book, now I like to think of myself as a logical person. I used to teach math many, many years ago, but you say logic is not enough to influence people. What is the secret sauce that influences them?
Well, whether we like it or not, every human being, so that includes Bill, you and I, we have a brain, and that logic is definitely very important. We also have a heart, so the emotion also is important. And how we feel about something, it could be about a task, a project, or even about someone, really is a distinct factor than what our brain thinks. And there are even other things going on within our being, like our gut instincts, which again is a distinct phenomenon within us. So all of these different things within us, the single human being, is influencing how we think, feel, and want to act about a certain decision, or whether to buy something, or how hard to push on something. And so if we want to be highly effective in influencing ourselves as well as others, we need to learn to master how to influence the mind, how to influence the heart, and how to influence the whole being.
And that's a great summary of your book. And as I said, you've really got me thinking of it now in everything I do. Am I being influenced? Am I influencing someone else? Now, does the term influence maybe have somewhat of a negative connotation? Do we think of persuasion, maybe salesmanship, the person who comes to our door or talks to us and kind of convinces us we want to buy this product?
I think you're spot on, Bill. In fact, we have an editorial circle giving us a lot of provocative questions and inputs in as we went through writing the book. And one of the first and most provocative ones is, how is influence in fact different from manipulation? So I think these are really important distinctions to make. Two essential points I would make, and then we can explore this as you would like. Number one, persuasion. A lot of the previous materials and even classics on the topic of influence have been a lot about tactical behaviors, how to get other people to do what we want them to do. Persuasion is in that category. Whether it's kind of wrapped in a warm and fuzzy thing or it's a hard exertion of power, the 20th century saw a lot of one-way exertion of power. And whereas we just don't think that cuts it anymore in the 21st century. Because even if you live in the same city, in the same family, frankly, we all have a much more diverse set of beliefs and assumptions and identities that really require us to be far more mutual and far more collective in trying to define the positive outcomes we all want to sacrifice for and work ourselves towards. So that's also why we think that we call the book Positive Influence and not just influence. It's because there is a difference between positive influence and negative influence. In fact, I got asked another provocative question, which is, hey, why should we even care about positive influence when there's so much negative influence? You just need to sort of open up the newspaper every day. But Sun Yan and I say it's precisely because there's so much negative influence that we have and the obligation and the opportunity to exercise positive influence in our own concrete individual way. That is agency we can exercise that no one can take away from us.
Yeah, that's a very good point because it seems the negative wins out. When we went through the COVID, a little germ that we can't see, et cetera, can disrupt our whole society and schedule of doing things and life, obviously. And yet there's so much more good going on that people are doing. That doesn't get any publicity. Probably COVID was written more about than any baseball, football, or basketball team. When you give seminars on this, and obviously you counsel clients, et cetera, and these are heavy duty corporate clients because influencing someone, I would assume in their world, can be literally millions or billions of dollars. And of course, that's what a business is about. Am I correct?
Well, the business is definitely about that, the billions. We firmly believe that business also needs to be about the people. So in the positive influence context, we believe we have to start with defining the outcomes that's worth really fighting for. And I mean fighting in a good way, really put our heart and mind into it, persevere, and persist. Is productivity, which is very important. So this is profits, efficiency, productivity, etc. The second we think super, super important, but really gets ignored mostly is satisfaction, which is, do people feel respected in what they do? Do people feel a good sense of self-worth? Because let's face it, you can give people money, but can you give people self-respect? If people don't have self-respect, that's when a lot of problems that we experience in society, in families happen. And the third positive outcome we believe is very important is growth. Certainly the growth of the organization. As we know, if a company starts shrinking, jobs get lost, family gets impacted. So growth is important. But it's also about the growth of the individual, which is, can this person really grow with the organization? And sometimes that growth is very painful, as we see with the United Auto Workers strike, or the Hollywood writer strike, or the actor strike. When there is an epochal change in technology or in consumer demand, then the way the things are done, the way business is done, goes through a heart-wrenching change, and people have to change with it. And that is something that has a lot of prospects for growth, but is painful. So are we collectively willing to go into that territory? And do workers feel that leaders are in it with them rather than doing it to them? Those, I think, are some of the important questions we need to grapple with. That's
really a great point, because I think we see it every day, at least with sports teams and their managers and general managers, and of course in the regular world with business, that if there isn't a cohesion with the group and if they're not with the same cultural values, it usually leads to problems and a losing team. And of course, as fans, we all get upset with that, etc. What reaction do you get when you work with a company? Do the people come back and the leaders say, gee, I was amazed, I never thought of this? Or is there some typical response that you get?
I've worked with many hundreds of leaders, and Sun Yan, certainly thousands of leaders. So first of all, I think most leaders are earnest and they're trying very hard. But I think they have a sort of problem that many of us have every day, which is, how do they inspire themselves every day So not just do the routine task of management or, making sure they hit the numbers and, going to that thing, but they actually really drive to these positive outcomes. And I think here's where continued inspiration of ourselves, influencing ourselves, which we emphasize quite a bit in the book, is so central because we do have to, mobilize our heart and mind in order sometimes to work on the tougher issues. So if I were to challenge business leaders on one thing, Sun Yan and I would probably say it's the sin of omission. Have you tackled the really tough issue facing your business and facing your people, rather than the one that, will get you by? And I think that's a very strong litmus question, the litmus test question that we can all ask ourselves.
Huijin, before we go further, I'd like our audience to know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Huijin Kong. She is the author of Positive Influence. And Huijin, we're going to ask you where we can learn more information about this. Is there a website we can go to?
Absolutely. It's www.positiveinfluence.life because it is about life and not just about work.
And obviously, our day is 2/3, 1/3 work, and probably 2/3 of our own life. And of course, our own life overlaps with work. So even more so, I guess, with our children, with even our pets and our neighbors, etc. That word influence doesn't go away. The more I'm thinking of it, you use the expression water, but it's like that. It's like the rain. I can walk outside. I can walk down. It's still going to be raining on me if it's a rainy day. Is there a way to measure someone's influence, almost like a scorecard for a baseball or a football team?
Absolutely. So you could measure the influence in a meeting. So if you were to get really scientific about this, Bill, and I think this might appeal to the math teacher in you, you could be very conscious in setting influence objectives you have for a meeting. So let's say you have 3 objectives, 5 objectives. And then you could have other people in the meeting score you in terms of whether those objectives are achieved. And that can be, oftentimes we find, even for highly successful executives, less than 40% of the objectives that they set, in fact, are achieved. And oftentimes it's the emotional, more emotive, more, shall we say, ethereal, but so essential objectives that get underachieved.
I love that. And as you said, you probably hit it right on the button because in my life in the past years, I was a math teacher. But that's a great way. And by doing that, the leader has to say, I'm going for these goals, whether it's losing weight, making more money for a company, adding more customers or patients to a medical practice, something like that. So they really have to put it out there, publicize it. Everybody has to know. And then there's a real scorecard for it. So I think that's a terrific response. And I love thinking that way because we can be held accountable, basically.
Exactly. I am huge about accountability. And just to illustrate how deep this accountability can go, Bill, it goes, it really forces the leader or anybody who's in that influencing situation, which is really anybody, to say, how do I want other people to think, feel, and do? So that they will want to go and achieve that productivity goal or work harder for that project. And actually being transparent, that is a very vulnerable thing to do. But if you're willing to do that, then it completely opens up really the space and the dialogue that can happen in a conversation in a room. And that's really what the sense of possibility and potentiality is all about, where something transformational can happen.
I love that. And again, it's a number that we can actually measure. Just like losing weight, if someone's 200 pounds and they want to get down to 190, the scale is going to tell them, are they effective? And if they get to 192, they're at least 80% effective, and they've done a pretty good job. So they're approaching their goal and obviously trying to do it. So at least it's on their mind. Huijin, we spoke before the show about 3 mindsets of positive influence, and I think that's in the introduction to your book. Could you tell us what those 3 mindsets are?
Yes, they are lenient, So this is really encouraging everyone to not treat the book as only a book to be read. And I also know that these days we might also get a lot of books we don't even read, but really apply the principles of this to your own life, to that next really important conversation you need to have, where you want to have that positive influence on someone you care about, on yourself. And that links to mindset number 2, which is apply it to your own situation, because if you don't apply it to your own situation and really give the principles a ride in down the lane of life and the lane of work, you won't really see your own sort of learning edge as far as your influence ability is concerned. And therefore, the potential for you to have so much more positive influence. And then that comes with the mindset number 3 as well, which is inquire into your own influencing bottlenecks. Everyone has a bottleneck, but it's different. Also, everyone has influencing strengths, which is different. So it's knowing what are your strengths, what are your bottlenecks, because if you can even overcome one of your influencing bottlenecks, your influence effectiveness will automatically shoot through the roof immediately. And we have a handy dandy tool, that Plus Influence Assessment, which you can access from our website to help you along.
While you're saying that, give our audience the website.
Positiveinfluence.life.
And of course, we will ask you again later in the show, so if our audience didn't get that down. But, like most great leaders, you break it down to such a simple list. And as you're answering the question, I'm thinking, wow, if I just did that, how it would change my daily outlook, how many more times I'm sure I would be influencing people, etc. When you work with people, are a lot of people, I guess I'm going to use the word astounded because that's appropriate, at how much influence they really have? Back when I was in high school years and years ago, people said, if your parents smoke, you'll probably smoke. And if they drive recklessly, your driving will be that way because you'll be careless and not care who's in the road. Simple negative things we might do during the day, inconsiderate things, taking somebody's parking spot without looking. Are people amazed at how many things they do that have influence?
Absolutely. So we do a 5-day boot camp for a top 25 MBA program, 250 MBA students every year, where they get to put through the paces on everything that's really the book is about. And the amount of insights that people get about, number one, what impact they're actually having on people, intended or oftentimes unintended, is number one, great insight for them. And two, but the most powerful insight, Bill, as you're imagining, is very true, which is when they role play a high stakes situation and they failed the first time, when they realize that why they failed and they can change their own thought pattern and their own how they show up and how they react and or not react for a completely different, better positive influence, you can just see the coin drop for everybody. And people understand that with a bit more consciousness, with a bit more deliberateness, we can exercise so much more agency over our thought, our emotion, and our actions for positive influence.
You've given me already so many things to be thinking of today. I'll be driving. I'm probably going to hit the fire hydrant, but I'll be driving down the street and thinking, am I influencing someone because I'm driving fast or slow or cautious or not cautious maybe? So you've really put a lot into my mind. I noticed in the book you say what works for some people will not work for others in terms of influence. Can you give us some examples?
Sure. So, for example, one of the influencing situations, a lot of young as well as senior leaders don't ace often is giving somebody timely, tough, constructive feedback. A lot of times people don't do it until it's too late. Now, let's say that two people go into the same conversation. One person is a very strong style. One person is a very soft style. The way they would approach it is going to be totally different. But each of them has to approach it and has to find their own way to get into that conversation, has to have their own way of engendering the trust from the feedback receiver that this feedback is coming from the right place. So that's why we emphasize so much about mobilizing our being. Because at some level, it isn't only about what we say, how fast we say it, when we say it, but it's really how much of our deeper personal qualities, the care that we have for somebody, the compassion that we have for them, and the courage we have to do something we don't want to do, but we know we should do it because it's the right thing. When those things, personal qualities, show up, they are the heavyweights of influence, especially positive influence.
Huijin, you've given us so many good things to think about, and you've really got my mind spinning now. But before we go further, again, I'd like our audience to know you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Huijin Kong. She is the author of Positive Influence. And Huijin, again, I would ask you to give us the website where we can learn more.
www.positiveinfluence.life.
And I honestly think, and then more we're talking to Huijin here, and I've gone through the book, if you're someone who is on the cusp of moving ahead in life, if you want to move ahead, and I think virtually any field, teachers must have influence, religious leaders, naturally salespeople, when the word leaders, politicians, the people on top of the pile, the CEOs, the presidents, it's a factor in everything we do, and even between a mom and a baby, the baby is going to be influenced by something they see, or if it tickles them or amuses them, they're going to be more receptive. So I can't think of any place in life where it really doesn't come in. And I know you're laughing and smiling as I am, but more and more I think I'm going to be an endorser for your book because of all the good stuff you have here. When you deal with leaders with this, what response do you get? You said you have a 5-day seminar, and I would think we're only talking less than half an hour now, and I'm amazed at how many times this comes up. And yet no one ever taught me this in school, and you're one of the few guests who's brought up the topic of influence. What response do you get back from the leaders?
Well, I mean, I think both in the course as well as in the course of talking to people about the book, some of the response I get, I already do that. I think I'm pretty good at influence. How are you going to convince people that they can improve? So I think, first of all, I want to acknowledge that we all have a natural ability to pick up important life skills, of which influence is one. Some of us may even had some extra training or feedback. For example, I was very lucky early on in my career. I worked for a firm that had very strong feedback culture. One of them, it was that I was too aggressive, and they even sent me to communications training to tone it down. So I think wherever we've gotten is a very powerful thing already. But the upside is so huge. Just by being more conscious, by being more deliberate, and really putting ourselves on the path of self-mastery to bring out our best instincts in the right moments so that we can encourage others to do so.
And that's a great expression you use, self-mastery. I think we all want that in one form or another, whether we might call it in some respects discipline or, as you say, mastery of talents. And here's something: we can make our life a lot easier if we can learn even just to increase our influence by 5%. Now, sometimes if we have salespeople on or people who are going for a job, we'll say, do a practice interview, or how would you sell me that product, and let's talk about it. Is there a way we can work with our coworkers or friends and more or less see, is it our style of influence, or do we come across, as you said, too aggressive, maybe too hard, or maybe too soft?
I think that especially in the United States, there is a very healthy amount of feedback. People get exchanged. People, can get 360-degree feedback, etc. So I find that most people have some level of awareness of where they're strong and where they may be a bit more weak in. I think the Rubicon really to become a very avid positive influencer is to what degree you think you can improve, and to what degree you really want to put in the effort to have more positive outcomes for your really pivotal conversations, and to recognize that that is a choice that you are making, whether you're consciously making it or not. And that it takes a leap of faith to say, wow, I can be a lot more. I can have so much more positive influence.
I guess even simple things I don't realize when I go out, but if I'm out walking my dog, I always pick up after the dog. I see in that area some people do not because there's dog remains sitting there. But hopefully someone sees me and takes it and says, hey, it would be a good idea to follow that gentleman because he's doing the right thing. He's picking up after his dog. And it makes our neighborhood cleaner, it's better, it's nicer, and all those other good things.
Absolutely.
When you dealt with the leaders in groups, the feedback you get, are there certain things they were doing that they came back to you and said, you've made me realize I've been doing XYZ wrong and I'm actually very good at ABC or vice versa? What type of feedback that maybe we can learn from your past experiences with corporate leaders?
I think if we're talking about corporate leaders, oftentimes what they end up doing is too much telling and too much talking and too much exertion of what they think is the right thing to do. So, and that manifests very strongly, especially when they're trying to get their companies to change. It's a well-known fact that 75% of major transformational efforts fail. Now you wonder why. It's certainly not because they didn't tell 5 times the logic of why people should transform. And yet, why is it people don't embrace that? It's because people don't just embrace things for logical reasons. Their heart, their whole being need to be mobilized and their resistance needs to be dealt with. So if there's one thing that corporate leaders, and in fact all of us, can do to be far more influential, it is in fact to listen, to empathize for true mutual understanding.
And if someone's listening, is there a way we can test ourselves just in our everyday life about our influence? Is there one recommendation you can end with and tell us about?
Absolutely. Take our Plus Influence assessment on our website, www.positiveinfluence.life. In fact, you can do a self-assessment and you can send the assessment to as many of your friends and colleagues you like. So you can see whether you're good on the things that you think you're good at, on the people who really matter to you.
Really, thank you so much. It's been a great experience. And before we wrap up, I want to ask you once again, give us the website.
www.positiveinfluence.life.
Huijin, thank you so much for being with us today. I'd like our audience to know that you've been listening to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.